Steelers Nation. The Pittsburgh Steelers are constantly looking for ways to improve this football team, and that is exactly what we want to see if this organization is serious about bringing better results to the Steel City. Every roster decision matters. Every young player matters, and every opportunity can become the difference between making the 53-man roster and watching the season from the outside. So before we get into today's big Steelers developments, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps the channel. And if you're new here, subscribe to Black and Gold Gridiron Updates so you don't miss the latest Steelers news. Steelers Nation, if you want the official Steelers store, the link is in the description and the comment. Tons of new Sideline gear and hoodies available. Because today, we've got two very interesting developments. The Steelers have added another wide receiver with a fascinating connection to Aaron Rodgers, while at the same time, one of the most intriguing quarterback battles on the roster may be changing in a way that Steelers fans need to understand. Let's start with the receiver room. Pittsburgh has just added Isaiah Winstead, a 27-year-old wide receiver who most recently stood out with the Louisville Kings during their 2024 UFL championship run. And here's the connection that immediately caught everyone's attention. Winstead previously spent time with the New York Jets, meaning he briefly shared a roster with Aaron Rodgers during the 2024 preseason. Now, 2 years later, Winstead is getting another opportunity to work with the veteran quarterback, this time in Pittsburgh. The Steelers reportedly made the move just 48 hours after moving on from Colton Dowell, creating another opening in a receiver room that continues to evolve as the regular season approaches. And Steelers fans should not look at Winstead as simply another camp body. This is a player who has taken a very unusual road to get back to the NFL. Winstead played college football at Toledo, East Carolina, and Norfolk State. At East Carolina, he became a major offensive weapon, catching 88 passes for 1,085 yards and 6 touchdowns. But his path to the NFL was complicated by his testing numbers. He reportedly ran a 4.7-second 40-yard dash at his pro day, which hurt his draft stock. Still, Winstead kept fighting. He eventually spent time with the San Francisco 49ers practice squad before getting an opportunity with the Jets. He appeared in preseason games in New York before being released during final roster cuts in August 2024. And now he's back. This time, he has another chance to prove that his athletic testing numbers don't tell the entire story. For Pittsburgh, the timing makes sense. The Steelers have DK Metcalf and Michael Pittman Jr. at the top of the receiver room, while Roman Wilson and rookie Jeremy Bernard are competing for major roles. But
the Steelers are scheduled to face the Green Bay Packers on August 13. Rodgers has not traditionally played extensive preseason football in recent years, but new head coach Mike McCarthy has not ruled out giving him some action. Rodgers himself has already indicated that if McCarthy wants him to play, he'll play. That could be extremely important for players like Winstead. Imagine getting your first meaningful opportunity with Pittsburgh while catching passes from one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Winstead doesn't need to become the next superstar. He simply needs to show enough to make the coaching staff say, we need to keep this guy. And that brings us to the second major storyline, the quarterback room. Because while Aaron Rodgers appears firmly established as the starter, Pittsburgh still has a fascinating battle behind him. Mason Rudolph brings experience. Drew Allar represents the future. And Will Howard is somewhere in the middle. A young quarterback with intriguing potential who may not actually have the developmental advantage many people assumed he had. When the Steelers selected Howard in the 6th round of the 2025 NFL Draft, the expectation was that he would have an important head start. He would spend an entire season inside the organization, he would learn the professional routine, he would learn the offensive system, he would get comfortable with the coaching staff. And then, when Allar arrived in 2026, Howard would theoretically have a year of experience over him. But that's not how things played out. Howard suffered an injury after only slightly more than a week of training camp during his rookie season.
He missed the preseason and lost a massive amount of valuable developmental time. And then came the organizational earthquake. Mike Tomlin stepped away. Arthur Smith's offense disappeared. Mike McCarthy arrived. And suddenly, much of what Howard had learned during his brief time in Pittsburgh became far less relevant. That is why Steelers insider Mark Kaboly's recent assessment is so important. Kaboly essentially argued that Howard should be viewed as a rookie this season. And honestly, that changes everything. Technically, Howard is entering his second NFL season, but developmentally, he is much closer to starting over. Think about the situation from Howard's perspective. He missed most of his rookie development. The coaching staff changed. The offensive philosophy changed. The quarterback development program changed. And now he's competing against Mason Rudolph, a veteran who has already started meaningful NFL games. That's not an easy situation. So if Howard isn't immediately beating Rudolph for the backup job, Steelers fans shouldn't panic. Rudolph has something Howard simply cannot manufacture overnight: experience. He knows what an NFL game feels like. He has played under pressure. He has started games.
Sometimes the best value comes from having someone who can step onto the field, run the offense, protect the football, and give your team a chance to win when injuries strike. And remember, Steelers fans have seen that formula work before. Charlie Batch is a perfect example of how valuable a trusted backup can become. So the Steelers shouldn't rush to make a final judgment on Howard. Instead, they need to watch how he develops under McCarthy. The same philosophy should apply to Isaiah Winstead. This is a roster full of players fighting for opportunities, and that's what makes this stage of training camp so fascinating. The Steelers aren't simply preparing for Week 1. They're discovering which players deserve to be part of the journey. Winstead has a chance to turn an unexpected opportunity into a roster spot. Howard has a chance to erase the setbacks of his rookie season. And both players are fighting for their futures in a Steelers organization that is clearly trying to build a deeper and more competitive roster. That is what I like about this stage of the offseason. Nothing is guaranteed. A player who looks like a long shot.
They have Aaron Rodgers. They have DK Metcalf. They have Michael Pittman Jr. They have TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, and an improving defense. But championship teams aren't built only from stars. They're built from players who take unexpected opportunities and turn them into something meaningful. And that's exactly what Winstead and Howard are trying to do right now. Because today, we're talking about a player who has already given Pittsburgh more than a decade of elite football. And somehow, at 36 years old, he is still making veteran offensive linemen look completely helpless at training camp. Cam Hayward isn't just surviving anymore. He's still dominating. And according to longtime Steelers beat writer Mark Kaboly, the veteran defensive tackle may have more left in the tank than anybody expected. Think about that for a moment. Aaron Rodgers may be the oldest active player on this Pittsburgh roster, but Cam Hayward is the heartbeat of the Steelers' defense and the longest tenured player in the organization. He has been wearing the black and gold since Pittsburgh selected him in the first round of the 2011 NFL Draft. More than a decade later, he's still out there winning one-on-one battles against players nearly 10 years younger than him. And that's exactly what happened at training camp. Kaboly recently highlighted an impressive rep from Hayward, and the description was almost unbelievable. Hayward pulled out his version of the legendary Reggie White hump move and used it against Brock Hoffman, a 300-pound offensive lineman. The result? Hayward made him look completely overmatched. And Kaboly's reaction was perhaps even more interesting.
If Hayward has lost a step, Kaboly basically wants someone to show him where that step went. That's how impressive the veteran has looked during camp. And Steelers fans should be paying close attention because this could mean much more than simply having another good season from a beloved veteran. It could mean Pittsburgh has an opportunity to manage Hayward's workload in a way that extends his career even further. That's where the younger defensive linemen become extremely important. The Steelers have invested heavily in the future of their defensive front. Keanu Benton has already established himself as an important piece of the unit. Then you have Derek Harmon and Yahya Black, two younger defensive linemen who have an opportunity to take on increasingly important responsibilities. And this is exactly the type of situation Pittsburgh needs. Because the Steelers don't necessarily need Hayward to play every snap like he did when he was in his physical prime. They need him to be devastating when his presence matters most. That's a completely different challenge. If Benton, Harmon, and Black can continue developing, Pittsburgh can rotate its defensive linemen more aggressively. That means Hayward can potentially stay fresher throughout the season. And if you're a Steelers fan, you know how important that could become. Defensive linemen take an incredible amount of punishment. Every snap is physical. Every game is a battle. And eventually, Father Time wins. But Pittsburgh may have found a way to delay that moment.
Instead of asking Hayward to carry the defensive line every Sunday,
The Steelers can allow the younger players to absorb more responsibility, while Hayward becomes the veteran weapon they unleash in critical situations. Third down, red zone, 2-minute situations, playoff football. Those are the moments where having an experienced defensive lineman who can still win one-on-one battles becomes incredibly valuable. And let's be honest, Hayward's career deserves that kind of respect. He wasn't always an instant superstar. When Pittsburgh drafted him in 2011, he had to work his way into a larger role. He didn't become a full-time starter immediately. His first start didn't come until 2013. Then, beginning in the middle of the decade, everything changed. Hayward developed into one of the most complete defensive linemen in football. He became a Pro Bowler. He became an All-Pro. He became a leader. And most importantly, he became the kind of player Steelers fans could depend on every Sunday. But there was one difficult chapter, the 2023 season. Injuries slowed Hayward down, and some people wondered whether his best football was finally behind him. At his age, that question was completely understandable. Defensive linemen don't usually get better at this stage of their careers. Usually, they lose explosiveness. Usually, they lose strength. Usually, the younger players start taking their place. Hayward decided not to follow that script. Instead, he bounced back. And over the last 2 seasons, he has reminded everyone why he's one of the most respected defensive players of his generation.
Even last season, when his sack numbers weren't spectacular, his impact against the run remained extremely important. And that's something that can sometimes be overlooked when people only look at the stat sheet. A defensive tackle doesn't have to record 3 sacks every Sunday to dominate. Sometimes dominance is forcing the running back to cut outside. Sometimes it's collapsing the pocket so the quarterback can't step up. Sometimes it's occupying 2 blockers and allowing a linebacker to make the tackle. Sometimes it's simply refusing to lose his gap. That's Hayward. And now he's entering another season with something that could make his situation even more interesting: a championship opportunity. Because for all of Hayward's individual accomplishments, there is one major piece missing from his resume: a Super Bowl ring. Think about everything this man has accomplished in Pittsburgh. Multiple Pro Bowls, All-Pro honors, more than a decade as a centerpiece of the defense, leadership through multiple coaching staffs, leadership through multiple generations of Steelers players, and one franchise. But he has never been able to finish the journey with a championship. Now, the window is getting smaller.
They have experienced players who have been through playoff battles, and they have a new coaching staff trying to build something different. For Hayward, this could potentially be one of the final opportunities to make a serious Super Bowl run. And imagine what that would mean. Imagine Cam Hayward finally standing on the biggest stage, holding the Lombardi Trophy, after giving everything he had to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That would be an incredible ending to an incredible career. Of course, there are no guarantees. The Steelers still have to prove that their new system works. They have to stay healthy. The offense has to produce. The defense has to become more consistent. And the AFC is still filled with talented teams. But that's why Hayward's continued dominance at training camp is so encouraging. Because Pittsburgh doesn't need him to be the player he was at 28. They need him to be the player he is at 36. And right now, that player still looks dangerous. There's another important element here that Steelers fans shouldn't overlook. Hayward is...
That's potentially one of the biggest reasons why his value extends far beyond his statistics. The Steelers are trying to build a defense that can compete now while preparing for the future. Hayward represents the bridge between those two goals. He can still dominate, and he can teach the players who will eventually replace him. That's the perfect situation for Pittsburgh. But there's one question I want to ask Steelers Nation. If Cam Hayward continues playing at this level, how many more seasons do you think he has left? Could we be watching the final chapter of his career? Or could Hayward potentially continue playing into 2027 and beyond if the younger defensive linemen allow Pittsburgh to manage his workload? And perhaps the biggest question of all, can Cam Hayward finally get the Super Bowl ring that has been missing from his legendary Steelers career? Because if Pittsburgh can put everything together, this might be one of the most Do you believe Isaiah Winstead has a legitimate chance to make the Steelers roster after his connection with Aaron Rodgers and his strong UFL season? And what about Will Howard? Should Pittsburgh remain patient with Howard and allow Mike McCarthy to develop him, even if Mason Rudolph wins the backup job? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because I want to hear what Steelers Nation thinks. And if you enjoyed today's update, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Black and Gold Gridiron Updates and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next Steelers news update. Official Pittsburgh Steelers gear, new drops, and exclusive items, all in the link below. Check it out, Steelers Nation! The Steelers are getting closer and closer to the regular season, and every practice, every preseason snap, and every roster move is going to tell us a little more about what this new Pittsburgh team can become. The competition is heating up, and Steelers Nation is watching.